Morning.
Morning. Welcome everybody. Tuesday morning, and fortunately for some of us, Leah's back. It's been chaos with the two grumpy old men for the last three sessions. Maybe some law and order will be restored, but I highly doubt it. So Lee, you've got a challenge on your hands this morning, and I think I'm still going to hand over to Trevor to kick off the morning because he put Ed on the spot yesterday, and we're going to have an interesting session, I'm sure. So Trevor, across to you.
Yeah, so yesterday I said, listen, I've been pulling out boxes all over the place, and I've got thousands of articles that I've written over 50 years in consulting to various operations, and just reminders to myself of life and business things that have allowed me to write books, etc. And so I posed the challenge. I found fantastic stuff, in my opinion, written by a fantastic author, in my opinion. I see it breaking down. So I said, you know what, surely we've all got these things lying around, and let's see, pick up some of these things that are sitting hidden on your shelves, come and share it with us, and maybe we learn something out of an article or a piece you wrote 10, 20, 30 years ago. So Ed, he jumped at the challenge.
Yeah, that's my downfall. I keep saying yes to things. I've chosen an article from 2005. It was published in a business magazine called Charities Management, and it would probably be exactly the same thing I'd write today. So what, 15 years later? So here goes. It's entitled, and I thought it was appropriate because it linked into what Herman was saying about participation yesterday. So here we go. Engagement investment as a way of implementing responsibility. Many charities have significant investments, particularly in equities. Charities, like many organizations, have taken steps to ensure that they do not invest in companies whose values are contrary to their own. For example, it would be more than unfortunate if Save the Children were invested in companies which exploited child labour. Save the Children investments are professionally managed in accordance with its ethical investment policy. That policy states we will not engage financially with any company whose practices are considered to be in conflict with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The policy also provides that investments shall not alienate either beneficiaries or supporters. Because of its campaigning nature, Save the Children has thought carefully about its investments and has implemented a policy that fits its aims. There will be some charities with less well-developed thinking in this area who should consider whether an ethical policy is the only approach and whether it is the best approach in all cases. A purely ethical approach to investment is simple, allows boxes to be ticked, and lets the trustees sleep easy. But there is another way. The other way is engagement. Engagement is about caring, about taking action, doing more of the right thing. Above all, it is about responsibility. In this day and age of large pension schemes, large life funds, ISAs, and especially tracker funds, if you're not investing in a company because of ethical reasons, there will be plenty of others who will invest. What have you achieved? Nothing. You've just walked away. Also, where do you draw the line when investing? Tobacco companies might be on the excluded list, but what about supermarkets which retail cigarettes? Or the advertising agencies which promote supermarkets? Or the suppliers of the advertising agency's photocopier paper? Or the mill where the paper, hopefully from renewable sources, was made? Or the logging company which felled the trees? How far down the supply chain should one go? Investing in companies by having a positive engagement with them to influence the impact they have on the environment, workers, and communities is perhaps a more efficient approach than purely adopting a non-investing ethical stance. It's not rocket science, it's a lot harder. With rocket science, you perform complex calculations, get them right, and achieve the desired result. Engagement is about persuasion, compromise, trade-offs, and uncertainties. It takes passion, dedication, and flair, which are not the normal attributes of mathematicians, accountants, or investment managers. With engagement comes leverage. The corporate sector is huge, and multinationals have massive reach and permeate almost all the communities in the world. By influencing the way companies do business, very large budgets can be accessed, and some of the best business brains can be brought to bear on developmental and other problems. But thinking that this approach is a magic cure would be failing to recognize a very important point. Companies exist to make a profit for shareholders, and charities exist to do charitable works. We cannot expect companies to be altruistic. Instead, time, effort, and imagination are required to demonstrate to companies that changes in behavior are to their benefit. Many charities have started work directly with companies to pursue their objectives. For example, Greenpeace with Unilever and NPOs, Save the Children with American Express, Procter & Gamble and IKEA, Oxfam with Starbucks, Rainbow Alliance with Chiquita, and Christian Aid with the Cooperative Bank. However, very few charities are actively engaged with companies via their investment strategy. It is perhaps hard for charities to see how they can influence the company they invest in. After all, there are not many charity trustees who are invited into the boardroom of big city institutions for a cosy chat over a cup of tea. However, fund managers have reacted to market demand, especially from pension schemes, and some now operate socially responsible investment services. Because fund managers in aggregate invest in a great deal of money on behalf of clients, including charities, they do have a significant amount of influence in boardrooms. For example, Insight Investment holds shares on behalf of clients in 79.8% of the companies in the UK FTSE All Share Index. And during the quarter ended 30th September 2004, engaged with 77 companies on a range of issues including biodiversity, human rights, responsible supply chain management, and climate change. Charities are often close to the issues because they are close to people, have a presence on the ground and care. They are uniquely placed to feed into socially responsible investment initiatives, highlight problem areas, and influence the agenda. They should not only think of their investments as balance sheet assets which generate income for achieving their aims, but should also see them as an asset to use directly in achieving their aims by influencing the companies they invest in. Persuading companies to take an enlightened route, whether it's towards sustainability or better treatment of employees or the environment, will also benefit investment performance. There is a growing body of evidence that good corporate practices lead to good long-term viability. Much of the empirical evidence is based on the effect of good corporate governance rather than good social responsibility practices. However, one needs only to think of the damage caused to Royal Dutch Shell over the planned sinking of the Brent Spar oil platform to see how damaging inappropriate practices can be. The reverse must also be true. Good practices reap benefits. Shell has recovered in the 10 years since then, but just think how much better their performance would have been if they had not had to spend a great deal of time and money rebuilding a tarnished reputation. Adopting an ethical investment policy is nice and easy. It's simple to say you meet a particular set of criteria and use an outside agency to monitor and certify this. Unfortunately, this approach leaves you very much on the outside, and we know that it's easier to effect change from within than without. Charities exist because people within them, be they trustees, employees, or supporters, care and want to tackle issues they see as important. Why should they walk away from those issues when these issues are within the companies they would invest in? An engaged approach makes sense. Non-investment should be the last resort, only if change is not forthcoming. I think I could have written that today with exactly the same words.
Wow. Yeah. Great, thanks, Ed. I think lots of food for thought in there, and it's a highly complex situation and set of questions. Although you say they are some simple solutions, but often simple solutions are very hard to implement, especially in existing structures, aren't they? I mean, it's the change element. Right, Trevor, yeah, let's get across to you.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated. I've got two questions to ask, but Herman was pointed to first. So I think before I ask those questions, does Herman want to jump in at this point?
I wanted to share a little story that I've written under the headline that I shared on the chat. So if you want to first comment on Ed's presentation, and I'll follow suit afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, great. So two things stood out for me there. That in the UK, there's obviously a highly developed charity institutional environment where I was interested in your insight that they hold shares. Did I understand that correctly, Ed, that the charities hold shares in 77 companies?
No, charities hold a lot of shares in a lot of companies because they very often get, when people die, they leave their sort of estate to them. And they use those investments to give them stability. So, you know, a reasonable sized charity might have 20 million invested, and they invest via fund managers. So they'll be invested across all the companies in the FTSE 100, which would, you know, size the FTSE All Share, which is, you know, over 1,000 companies. But only about 77 engagements happen a year.
All right. So maybe this is something that Jasper at a later stage can actually look into, because I do not believe that is what charities or, you know, we would probably identify them as NPOs and that sort of thing are doing in this country. So their effective boardroom leverage is almost nil, in my opinion. But someone can correct me there, because I'm a hermit. I stay at home. I don't get into these boardrooms anymore. The other thing that interested me there was when you broke down the differentiation between company and charities, that companies' profit motive, I'm 100% agreed with you, and that charities have an altruistic motive. I would like to make a comment that sometimes I think in this country, in South Africa, people tend to get into, yes, can you hear me? People tend to get into NPOs because they actually need a job, so they form their own NPO to actually give them an admin fee to keep themselves in the job. So I'm a little bit cynical about NPOs here, but understand quality charities and what they can do with the right intention. And the other comment that I want to make, I'm just going to add another one here, is I think here in South Africa, as opposed to what you were talking about in a pretty sophisticated type of environment, is what I heard from that article. We have the concept of CSI funding, corporate social responsibility, or corporate branding that sort of happens through the CSI function. That's an internal function within companies. And I think that breaks down the charitable causes, because you have what would we call it, stonewalling taking place by an individual that's either employed and tends to stonewall intentions that people have to work with companies. So I just throw that into the mix.
I think even though South Africa might not have the same structure with its charities, there are big charities at work in South Africa, and South Africans are a member of big charities like Greenpeace. So I think the principle still applies. But I agree with you. You know, back home, the definition of charity is so broad that some of them aren't. For example, public schools, which posh people go to, are classed as charities. And it really annoys me because charities get tax relief, so I'm actually helping to pay for posh people. And yes, we do get some people that form their own charities, perhaps for their own reasons, but not as cynically as you'd say, but I'll accept that you know what goes on in South Africa and I don't.
Fascinating area for us to discuss later on. I'm going to shut up.
Thanks, thanks, Trevor. Right, yeah, Mpulela, let's get across to you. Your thoughts on that?
Sure, yeah. Where do I start? Look, it was great, Edward. It's food for thought as well. I guess again it goes down to motive, to say, you know, sometimes an action or sometimes an activity is neutral. It's more the motive that determines whether it's good or bad. It's a matter of what at the end does one want to accomplish. So that's the first comment. The second thing is, you know, talking about business being the objective of business being to make a return for its shareholders. I've always wondered about that objective for business. I know that it's always easier to simplify what an objective is, so that it's not clouded. But I always wondered if it's not too simplified for corporates to that be the only, if not the central objective. Because then if the objective is to make money for shareholders, to what end? For what good reason? It almost feels half for me. You want to make money for what? So that you have the most money. Like, what's beyond that? Sorry, I'm throwing it out there because as you spoke about that, it just came back that I've always thought about that, to say, is that truly really the main objective, is to create a return for shareholders? I understand it in a way. If you've invested and you've put in money, you want to make money back. So that what happens then thereafter? Yeah, can I leave it there, Ivan?
Thanks, Mpulela. Yeah. Ed, I don't know if you want to comment on that. I know Trevor's got things to say on that subject.
Yeah, just on that subject, I mean, I think it's very, very interesting because legally, especially, well, given the way companies are formed in the UK, and I think maybe company law is very similar throughout the world, legally, that is what a company is formed to do. It says in the constitution that's what it does. But actually, when then companies start, whole sort of other things get in the way, don't they? Ego, bureaucracy, self-serving, all sorts of stuff. But strip it down to the legality, and that is what directors should be doing. Directors should be operating the company to make a profit for the shareholders. That doesn't mean to say it happens, but that is what the law says.
Interesting and nice and simplified. So yeah, Stella, let's get across to you next.
No, brilliant article, Ed. There is so many thoughts and ideas and insights that you've got there. What struck me was when you talked about engagement needs to be caring, you must take responsibility, and you know, you must take action. So I totally agree with that. Just on the corporate social investment, I was just thinking when you guys were talking about that, I'm very skeptical about it. I know with the King 3 reporting requirements that companies need to adhere to, there is that element of corporate social investment, and they need to, companies need to report on that in their financials and a report that goes out, especially if you a listed company. But I just, I get the feeling that many companies see it as a tick box exercise, you know. So on the one hand, you have dealings or investments that's not honorable, like many examples that Ed talked about in his article. And then on the other hand, yes, we need to do it because of our annual reporting and everything. So again, it comes back to what Mpumelelo was saying. What is the motive behind what you're actually doing? So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Thanks.
I totally agree with that, Stella. I think a lot of companies they lie, they greenwash. That's why I'm talking about the investors engaging. And it goes back to what Herman was saying yesterday about democracy. It's about participation. If shareholders aren't active in saying what they want, then companies will just say, yeah, I've ticked this box, we're green, off we go, and they lie.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, and I love the connection between democracy and shareholders, because I think that's exactly what it should be. I don't think it is. Is the voters should be shareholders in the democracy. You know, if you think of the discussions that we've had over the last couple of days, and if you then are activist shareholders in that democracy, you know, you have a say in the way things are done and run. So yeah, a very, very interesting connection there. So yes, but let's get a question. Sorry, Stella.
Sorry, just the last comment. I think also sometimes what happens is companies, yes, the bottom line is to make money for the shareholders, but then there is so many stakeholders involved that I think that picture gets blurred between what is good for the shareholders and interests that the stakeholders have in the company. So just like something to think about.
Yeah, it's an interesting definition, as Trevor has put in the chat there. You know, stakeholders are not necessarily shareholders, but shareholders are stakeholders. And the question is, what weight should stakeholders have that aren't shareholders? So yeah, that's a whole nother direction, I think, of discussion. So yeah, interesting one. Right, Jasper, let's get across to you next.
Morning. I think I was triggered by that question of just Trevor to Edward on the financial structures of NPOs, and we do have a few. Gavin, for instance, one of our partners, many years ago, I think 20 odd years ago, helped. He serves as a treasurer on the. I don't know what's the exact name, but it's the entity for the physically disabled. And for years, they've been struggling with standing in line with government funding through the lotto and never getting the money. And then they finally set up a business, and they identified at that stage, BE was just coming out. And many of the people in the physically disabled were then also of the right pigmentation, but they then structured a whole value chain where it was beneficial to companies to then, so it wasn't so much charity, it became a business. So for the companies, they had access to a level 1 BE entity that they then employed to do certain work for them, and ended up with a whole lot of small scale businesses in all sorts of things, from plumbing, manufacturing, panel beating, whatever. But these people on their own do not have access to tenders and large business. And in the end, the whole thing then became a value chain, very successful. That now is basically funding that organization on an ongoing basis, and at the same time, empowering SMMEs. But that's the only one I know of. I know of a few churches that make their facilities work as community centers throughout the week and find ways to make it profitable. But it is not something that I think is uppermost in the minds of people on the NPO side of things. My comment on the article, I mean, good writing technique and words there. And I was just thinking how many people write not necessarily articles, but keep a journal. So I want to bring in the concept of a journal. And I found it extremely helpful since 1987. I was at a stage where I was in total confusion and turmoil in my mind, moving out of a corporate environment and totally blank and fearful about the future ahead of me. And your mind starts going in circles and spinning, and you keep thinking the same old negative thoughts over and over, until I then forced myself to get myself, those days, one of these big A4 books with these black covers outside. And I started to just journal my thoughts. And I made a commitment to myself that if it's a new thought, I'll write it down. If it's an old thought, it's already written down. I don't have to think about it. And that started to, and I then said, I'm my own best counselor because I'm closest to the problem. And that has helped over the years to, as things come up, first of all, they got me out of my confusion and onto a track. And then as you start getting insight into the thing that you're busy with, you write down thoughts. It could be of a spiritual nature. It could be of anything. And today I can go back all the way to 1987. And it's interesting how life appears in cycles. And every now and then in a couple of years, you come against the next problem that you think, this is it. I've never had something as bad as this. And then you read back to your old articles and you realize that, hey, when I had this previous problem, I also felt this way, that this is it. It was never as bad as this one. And look, I've come through this whole thing. So I want to encourage people to keep a journal, start a journal. And you don't necessarily write in it every day, but it makes for interesting reading as time goes on.
Great, thanks, Jasper. Right, Cecile, let's get across to you. Cecile, are you with us? Or are you?
Yes, sorry, I missed all of it. I was standing up.
Okay, all right. Right, Master, are you with us? I think you called Galaxy Tab this morning. Is that you, Master? There's the Master, and yeah, happy birthday, Master. You
Thanks.
For birthday this morning, eh?
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Good.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting article, but what also comes into mind is, you know, charity organizations can be, yes, used and abused. There are a few things that comes into mind. I mean, the issue of compliance, as Jasper was saying, about using a disability organization for compliance, so that you meet the BE points. Is it morally correct? Does it go with the values? But also on the other side is that that same charity organization has to have a sustainable livelihood. And if wherever he used to get resources from, if that tap is closed, there is always that creative way of wanting to sustain yourself over time. But also, I mean, the motive of business. I think each and every business, when it starts, there is a particular motive or a particular purpose or a particular need to address. Now, if you address that particular need, it does not necessarily mean that the business is created just to meet the monetary value for shareholders. There is a need that they address, but in the process, there is money that flows into that particular organization. And charity organizations can also be abused, especially with the term that they use for profitability, which is called surplus. Now, I mean, the term might be saying surplus, but what we know is that they've made profit on that particular day or in that particular year. So it depends on the motives and the moral value behind a charitable organization.
Right, thanks, Master. Yeah, some interesting points you add into the mix there, because for me, there's a couple of things. So, you know, does a charity by adhering to its moral standpoints and its ethical standpoints actually cut its nose off to spite its face in terms of getting revenue where it desperately needs revenue? So do you limit your potential sources of revenue by actually following that approach. Yeah, it's a big challenge. And the other question is, how are the funds actually applied? Are they applied to overheads and survival and salaries, or are they applied to actually meeting the needs of the constituency that they're supposedly serving? So some interesting thoughts that come out of there for me. So Lee, your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Ivan. And we'll go back to Herman, will we? So thanks, Ed. What a great way of stimulating thinking in a new and different direction. And I really appreciate that in 2005, you were challenging charities to step up to the mark and do more than tick box exercises. And as you say, simple but difficult to implement. The thing that stood out for me is where power lies. And we often put power in the hands of corporate to say they dictate what they should be doing, or shareholders dictate. But if we find what's in it for them, and that you might say that's unethical or that's not the reality. The reality is that everybody is looking for a benefit to them, whether that's a person or a company. And if you have their interests at heart, so you obviously hold what you need as the thing that you need to negotiate with. And I think there were some words that Edward used, like flair, negotiation, compromise. And these are skills as well as, and that we need to nurture and not just be on the receiving end one way or the other. And so if you're able to know what's in it for the other party, you give them what they want and you get what you want in return. And I think this is where charities too often use the moral, card. This is the right thing to do, or it's actually doesn't work. So we have to be clever, and I think that we can get what we want just by being astute in these situations, rather than being cap in hand. And that's certainly how I feel, and that's certainly what certainly in South Africa. And I feel often NPOs, CSI projects, so often come cap in hand from a place of powerlessness, asking and begging, rather than seeing that they have something to contribute and to engage and to challenge. And now you've got something much more powerful, much more important to offer. And I think it's a mindset that charities and NPOs need to have, to realize that they have a role to play, and that's really, really important. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Lee. All right, Herman, your thoughts on that? And I don't know if we have time to handle your article now. I'm not sure how long it is, but maybe you can just let us know. Otherwise, perhaps we keep it for a session tomorrow, if that's okay with you, if you're going to be available. But yeah, let us know. Are you muted, Herman?
Yeah, but let's keep the article for tomorrow. As far as the whole article by Ed is concerned, insightful, and also I think he mentioned that he would write it exactly the same way as he did, if I remember, 10 or 15 years ago. I believe it would change for the very simple reason that there's definitely a shift in consciousness, at least in Europe. And that's where even big corporations start talking about stakeholders rather than shareholders. Because irrespective of what your intentions are, if your market doesn't go along with, for example, you polluting water, air, or what have you, you've got no market anymore. So your shareholders will not have an income. And as I said, there is a very, very strong movement, definitely in Germany, where I'm reasonably well up to date with these kind of things happening. A scandal like Volkswagen 30 years ago would have never been uncovered. Today it was. And you know, it's cost Volkswagen billions of dollars in fines, whether in America or in Europe, for the damage they did to the environment, for the cheating they did of their clients, namely giving wrong CO readings, etc., etc. As I said, 30, 40 years ago, it would have never come out. Today it does. So companies have to adapt if they don't want to be become unsustainable, if you like. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Herman. Yeah, you know, there's lots of questions that can be raised around those points as well, and I think we'll probably keep some of those for future discussions. So Lee, you're back in the hot seat. Welcome back into the hot seat. What are we going to do? Herman's article tomorrow and take it from there, make it easy for you. So Herman, if you're okay with that, we'll pick up on your article in the morning and use that as the kickstart for the day. Is that good with you?
That's fine with me. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Herman. Right. So Lee's just had the pleasure of being a participant this morning. So Lee, no pressure back after a couple of days off. So Mpulela was desperate to have you back. He wasn't happy with these two grumpy old men running the show here and the direction the conversations were taking. So,
yeah. and let me just say thank you for letting me have a little bit of time off. It was just good just to just take some breathing space. As Trevor said, breathe 1, 2, 3, and I took my 1, 2, 3 days. I did some breathing, and so it was good to have a break. Thank you. But also good to be back. Nice to see everybody, and love to see all these lovely, wonderful faces and have great discussions. And happy birthday, Master. Great to hope you have a fabulous, fabulous day.
It's fantastic.
Thanks, Lee.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and especially you, Master. Have a good one. I hope you're going to be spoilt, and we look forward to meeting you tomorrow morning again at 8 o'clock and hear what Herman's got for us on the go. So have a great one, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow. Go well. Cheers.